Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everyone, my name is Debbie from NDIS Property Australia, and you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides, brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Today, welcome back Kevin from Paramount Disability Homes.
Thanks for having me again. Which episode are we up to?
580? No, I think this must be your, fifth or sixth at least.
Something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we love having you, Kevin, because you've got so much to input into the SDA world with everything that's going on. Now, today we are going to be covering a very important topic, a very timely topic, which is the closure of the group homes across Victoria. Now, this was actually highlighted in an article that came out in The Age about a week ago, I believe, first week of September, really highlighting that there are about 5,000 NDIS participants, and I believe a lot of them have got SDA funding, that are currently living in the homes that have been rented by the state government, and those properties, the leases are ending 31st of December 2025. So we're talking about 3.5 months now. And there's a lot of issues involved here. There's a lot of people that will need to be moved out. There's a lot of families being impacted. And mostly there's a lot of participants also being impacted by this. Struggles with the care providers in moving them on, in maintaining the care that they need. And I think, Kevin, you're in a unique position here because you are working very closely with a lot of the providers that are looking after these participants and doing everything you can. Paramount are doing everything you guys can to help as many people as possible. So can you maybe give us a bit of a background on, from your perspective, on what's been happening and, where this is going to end up?
I think I might give some context on how everything's evolved to today, because it's been a long time since, these group homes have been operating for a long time, even pre-NDIS times, so pre-2013. Obviously, these group homes are owned by, in Victoria, the state government, so the Department of Housing. They own about 600 to 700 group homes that are SDA registered. So just like any other SDA, they have been approved SDA dwellings, but many of them don't have any of the accessibility features that we may see. They didn't get assessed like any of the new SDA builds, so they were essentially grandfathered into the system. So they were approved as SDA, I think, back in as early as 2016.
And I guess a lot of them are like basic level.
Yeah, basic level.
Which means they don't meet IL, FA, robust or HPS.
Exactly. So a lot of them are basic levels. So the state government owned these homes before sort of pre-NDIS times. Prior to NDIS, the state government also had contracted their own support workers that were a part of these homes. There was a huge population of disabled people living in these homes. About, as you know, the 5,000 that you're speaking about, a lot of them have been in there for 20, 30 years. And obviously the NDIS came about, so it came to a place where the Victorian government no longer were in a position to manage the support workers inside the house as well. So they had to integrate these group homes into the NDIS system. And they did that by, contracting the support workers to these large group home operators that you've seen on the media. And the houses themselves became registered as SDAs, which meant that the participants living in those houses, whether or not they qualified for SDA, they were given the funding. So people living inside these houses, they're generally they're slightly older. So they're in their 50s and 60s, most of them. And yeah, they've been with the same sort of support workers for a long time. So when I say these support workers are contracted to these big group home operators, is, they could have been working in the house for 20, 30 years, but essentially the group home operators employed them as staff. And it's really important to note when they got employed as staff, obviously they were on the wards, which means that they got paid a lot of employment benefits, and they're typically a lot more expensive than a normal support worker, which might cost $35 an hour, $40 an hour. These workers get paid a lot of benefits. And obviously the state government knew that it wasn't, it wasn't going to be an easy transition. So hence why there was a subsidy involved.
Tell me about the subsidy.
Yeah, so the subsidy was about, I believe it was a couple $2 billion. I don't remember the exact figure, but the state government gave a subsidy to help these group home operators in transitioning these support workers. Obviously, there's a lot of costs that had to be put up front, and that subsidy is actually what is ending at the end of this year.
Okay, so it's actually a subsidy to help pay for the workers.
For the workers, exactly.
Okay, all right. So it's not actually the leases that are ending.
Yeah, the leases. Obviously, I'm not sure exactly what the subsidy covers, but I'm assuming any problems with the house, admin staff, support workers, to help them transition into these group homes. But obviously what's happened in the last couple of years is that it's been harder and harder for these large SIL providers, group home operators, to keep their margins, high in the SIL industry, because, you've got funding issues, you've got ratio issues with care. So yeah, I might explain how the care model works in a group home to give a bit more context as well. So in a group home, you typically have about 5 people living in one home. And obviously these, clients on a 1-to-5 care ratio. So they realistically, you still need about, 4 to 5 people in each house for the care providers to be profitable. But what we've seen is, because it is an aging population, a lot of people have, either unfortunately passed away or found alternative housing solutions. And there's actually a lot of vacancies in these group homes. So a lot of these group homes are actually not profitable, even with the subsidy. So you can imagine, with the subsidy ending now, it'll cause a huge, financial strain on these group home operators. And a lot of them are not-for-profits, and they're already losing money with the subsidy. Yeah. So I think that's the first layer of the issue, which is it's not profitable for the care providers to continue operating in these houses. And with the subsidy not being there, they've got to shift those participants, and they have to close down the houses, because next year I don't believe they're contractually obliged to hire the same support workers as well inside the houses. So that might mean unemployment for a lot of support workers as well. That's what people are not seeing as well. Yeah.
Okay, so that is sort of history, the background to what's happening. And we're at the point now where these subsidies are going to end in 3.5 months. There's going to be a lot of these homes that are going to have to close because the providers just cannot keep operating them. They're already losing money, and it's just becoming so financially unviable. So what happens next?
So obviously, like Paramount, we have already talked to, if not most of the group home operators, and for them, it's about setting up a transition plan. Obviously, a lot of the group homes in Victoria are situated in inner areas, and there's a lot more of an abundance of apartments opposed to housing. So there's only limited rooms for, houses that are being built. So that's the first sort of problem. Obviously, there's
just nowhere for them to move in.
There's just nowhere for them to move in. And the second biggest problem, I'm sorry, I'm just talking about problems instead of the actual issue, but it's what's preventing them from moving is their funding levels. Because you've got to bear in mind, these residents have been grandfathered into the system. They've been handed an SDA. Many of them are on basic funding, which...
How much is a typical basic funded SDA funding?
Anywhere between a couple $1,000 to, $7,000-8,000. So that's not going to cut it for any investor or any fund or any landlord, right? So
absolutely not.
yeah, it's a big nightmare because we still have new clients that have just been approved with SDA, which will be much more attractive for clients to accept. So, when we looked at this problem 3 to 6 months ago, we knew what it took. Well, we knew what they had to do to help these clients move out, which was to apply through a change of circumstances to get their funding uplifted. But I guess the problem was so big that you can't get everyone to go for a plan review and get their funding uplifted. And some people will get rejected because they're elderly. Some people might just get SDA completely removed from their plan. And so operationally, it's a huge, I still don't think there's too much clarity with how they're going to be able to shift people into new housing without the right funding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And even if they lose their SDA funding, they still obviously need somewhere to live, which is going to be the alternative being a still house.
Yes.
Still being looked after. And, I know that that's a big issue too. There's the housing crisis and SILs finding it difficult to even just rent a normal property to look after clients in.
Yeah, exactly. So, that it's either sort of eviction for these big group home operators or it's finding them an alternative solution. But yeah, if you rent out a house as a SIL provider, a lot of the houses aren't accessible even unless you're willing to go out to further out areas, which many of these SIL providers probably don't want to go. Although
I was just going to ask that because we do know of the oversupply of new SDA in the northern suburbs, the southeastern suburbs, but predominantly in the western suburbs, the outer western suburbs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, but it could go that direction. And if it does go that direction, it poses a risk because they will lose many clients because many clients won't want to go out that way.
That's right. And what about the support workers? Are they going to want to go all that way to work?
Yeah, so it's a whole new sort of a revamp. And what I think what will happen is a lot of the clients they'll lose a lot of clients because a lot of clients can go find a new SIL provider. They can try and seek for alternative accommodation because a lot of them sort of more medium-sized SIL providers have available accommodation in good locations. They've rented out SIL properties, but the problem is as well, no one's helping these clients get the right SDA funding. So there's no initiative. Now, in an ideal world, it would be really, really good if the NDIS was to say, look, everyone that has, your basic and group home funding, today we'll just uplift you to, a new SDA plan and a new SDA funding. And that would be the easiest solution and fix this whole sort of mess. But the government, the NDIS is not going to do that, or at least not in any time soon. So we're still in a very, we're in a scenario where we're quite stuck. But yeah, there are providers that are out there that are trying their best to secure housing. What they'll do is, I'll give you guys an example. They'll, for example, have 3 clients that have lived together for the past 10, 15 years. They still want to live together and they will move into a new house together. And once they move in, obviously they'll be on a lower funding, but they'll apply for a change of circumstance whilst they live in the house. But you've got to note that not every investor is willing to take on that risk because they might get knocked back. So yeah, unless these care providers are willing to move out further, I just don't know what will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, it's a big. We could see this was a big problem coming 6 months ago when we knew this was happening, and I didn't know what the answer was, and obviously no one still has an answer for it. But what are you guys doing? What successes are you having, even if they're little minor ones?
So the group home operators that are a little bit smaller, that prepared themselves earlier, and we did have these conversations about 3 to 6 months, and they started doing plan reviews 3 to 6 months ago. We're going to see success with those stories. But for the larger group home operators, for most of the clients, I mean, they probably don't even know what is going to happen in the next couple of months unless they have some sort of exit plan. But yeah, there are definitely some success stories that arise for the providers that prepared these clients a little bit earlier. Yeah, but in the world of SDA, yeah, it's going to be interesting how the next sort of 6 to 12 months will play out because, yeah, at the end of the day, they're their care providers, they can, as bad as it sounds, they can stop their or cease operations.
Yeah, and look, we've seen a lot have closed down. A lot of SIL providers have been closing down this year.
Yeah.
Because they just can't make it work anymore.
They can't make it work, exactly. And the good ones, they will elect another care provider to do a transition and take over their clients. But ultimately, it's not looking good for most of these larger care providers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and NDI, the funding ratios, the approvals, the timeframes is not making it easy for any of these big providers to survive. So we're seeing more sort of, the medium-sized providers that are capturing or attracting the new clients that come into the NDI space, and they're the ones that are a little bit more agile, that will probably be their doors knocked on.
Of it, yeah.
Yeah, get their doors knocked on, and yeah.
Yeah, look, and we're, obviously we're involved with the SIL summits that have been going on around Australia. The National SIL Summit on the Gold Coast is coming up next week, and there's always a lot of conversations and presentations in those summits around making SIL businesses work with the lower funding ratios, with all of the housing problems that there are. A lot of the conversations and the recommendations come up with just finding smarter ways to be able to keep your head above water, and not just keep your head above water, but thrive as a SIL business. So I think there is a lot of innovation happening there for them to find ways to get around all these issues. But if we're talking about up to nearly 5,000 people in these homes in Victoria, that's still a lot of people that are probably going to end up without a home. That the system is going to fail them. Where are they going to be left? Is that the families are going to have to, step back in and help? As you said, a lot of them are older, so maybe they don't have families anymore.
Mm.
It is a little bit scary, I think, for the participants. It's obviously it's also scary for the care teams that are looking after them and don't know how they're going to manage this.
Mm.
What are you seeing in terms of the number of SDA properties coming on board in the inner and mid-ring? Obviously, we know there's apartments, but houses in these areas that are in high demand. Are you seeing more being developed, more coming?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing a little bit more that's being developed. Obviously, not at the pace of what we're seeing in the outer areas or apartments per se, but there's a lot of people, typically the builders, there's a lot of builders that own properties as well. They might have a piece of land and they've discovered SDA. And for most of these areas, we get clients, more than one, transitioning in as soon as handover. So, yeah, very, very high demand for anywhere middle ring, really, or inner ring. We have also seen a huge slowdown in, we've seen a huge slowdown in areas in the outer. So there's been just a lot less properties that have come up in construction. I suppose that sort of the earlier the financing strains have, we've seen less investors knock on our doors, mum and dad investors, in sort of greenfield areas. So a good thing for anyone that's listening that might have a property in the outer area is that, we're seeing less supply of these homes, and demand's always been constant because supply doesn't affect the participant inquiry. So there's still steady levels of participant inquiry in, your western suburbs, your southeastern suburbs. And we slowly are seeing the people that have held on see a positive result.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah, it's good to hear. So I think probably give it another sort of 6 to 12 months or even 2 years, there might be a shortage of housing in these further out areas, such as Geelong and sort of your Casey's and whatnot. But yeah, I definitely have seen a lot less new development come up.
Yeah. And I think, once it became evident of what was going into the pipeline, people did realise, okay, it's time to review what's going on here, the whole industry. So, but yeah, we still do have a lot of properties out there that have space for these participants. But as you said, they don't want to move out there. Their care teams aren't going to want to travel out there to work. And that's the big issue. There'll be a slow migration, I guess.
Yeah, there'll be still people that will migrate. So like there'll be scenarios where your family will step in and say this is not right, and they will probably reach out directly to us, and we can look at leasing properties out directly to help clients. And they might not have a huge amount to contribute, but they have the SDA in their plan. And what it means for the investor is that if they go through a plan review, the investor might go from, $20,000 or $5,000 of funding to something much higher. So if you're an investor, you get one of these, if you can help out one of these clients, and it could be great.
Yeah, with the long-term potential of those clients those tenants having full funding.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Okay, Kevin, well, I don't want to, talk too much more about this, but it's an issue we've known about, and it's fantastic that Paramount's being really proactive in trying to help the providers and, of course, the participants in finding alternative tenancy options. But as you said, Kevin, for any investors out there who have got a property in Melbourne, this is potentially something that could help you tenant it if it's vacant. And as we've been saying, for anyone who has a potential site for an infill somewhere in Melbourne, re-listen to this episode, because there is going to be a huge demand, ongoing demand for, I think, quite some time to come, if we've got thousands of potential SDA funded participants needing a home, and those homes are still not there. Yeah. So, okay, anything else that you wanted to add we haven't covered?
No, I mean, look, feel free to message me or Debbie. But yeah, happy to answer if anyone has further questions about what's going on. I'd love to do a follow-up session as well, maybe down the track, to see how everything plays out.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do that in the new year and just see what has happened.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Kevin. Always great to have you on board. And that is it for today. And we'll talk again on the next episode.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.